And we are live. Tom Panos, Phil Tarrant, Real Estate Exposed. March 2022. Real estate market still firing along, some would say. Others saying the boom is over. Tom Panos, is the boom over?
It's over for the key markets of Australia that everyone seems to be obsessed with the most, which is Sydney and Melbourne. So, Phil, that's official. I'm saying it. The data is saying it. The only people that aren't saying it is the vendor that's got that one special property that ticks all the boxes. It's got upside. It's in the school catchment area. It's got a big parcel of land. It's in the best street in the suburb. Those properties, man, I'll tell you, they're resilient. And I don't care whether rates go up by 2%. There's always going to be buyers on those properties. But Phil, everything else, we've got to accept it. Prices have dropped. Josh Tesselin, Ray White Quakers Hills, who spoke at the great conference you put on 2 weeks ago, has told me straight, $1.4 million properties are selling for $1.2 million now, and that is in his area. And he's got a very good helicopter view because he transacts more homes than any other agent in Australia. The top end of the market, Phil, 10, 15 million, that's still gangbusters. The expats that are still returning from pandemic world back to the country, they're lining up with money. But Phil, it is officially over. The party is over. Properties have gone up. Like we know, every 7 years we'd say, there's a rule. Every 7 years they might double. Man, if you look at real estate across Australia, we've had an incredible run, Phil. Particularly the 2020, 2021 period, the price growth that we've had has been incredible, but it had to come to an end, and it has come to an end. And it's important that people realize it, because at the moment, Phil, every weekend there's a story in the paper about a property that sold for $350,000 over reserve. But there's another 2,000 properties that went to auction that didn't sell over reserve. They might not have sold at all. And what we've got to start looking at is the sample size of what's really happening, Phil. The market has definitely changed, but Sydney, Melbourne is the two key markets that it's very clear.
Hence the reason why this is called Real Estate Exposed. We'll talk about real estate in a way in which other people don't talk about real estate. Tom, we were chatting about this last time we come off air last Thursday, and very much this is current affairs meets property. What's happening in the world, what's happening in Australia, what's happening with our economy, what's happening with our population meets real estate. And this intersection is absolutely key. It's a topic that every single person speaks about at dinner parties. So we like to go behind the real headlines here and chat about what's happening. But property in Australia, Tom, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends which way you look at it, if you're in the business of media, is largely driven on sentiment and headlines. So the headlines now you see coming out are very much about a very different market. Now you're calling, Tom, the end of the real estate boom. Okay, here we are, 24th of March, 2022. We'll think back and come back to this at a point in time and see if Tom Panos was right. He usually is. Sometimes he's wrong. But prior to this, Tom, has it been a real estate boom? Have we actually been in boom conditions?
It has, because if you actually have a look at the last 7 years of prices, so the turning point, Phil, was the federal election last time. It got everyone by surprise. Liberal won. Labor had some policies that weren't going to be favourable towards real estate. That didn't happen. I remember I was overseas and I came back from my first auctions on that Saturday, and the streets were full of cars. I couldn't get parking to park my car to do the auction. That was the turning point. Now, Phil, off the top of my head, that federal election was it 17 or 18?
18.
18. So, you're going to have to forgive me with the cough because I've got this ongoing, lingering pneumonia symptom, and occasionally I use a puffer, believe it or not. That helps, but I haven't got it with me. But what's the point? The point I'm making here is between 2018 and 2022, we're talking about people having their properties that have more or less come close to doubling depending on the suburb that you've been. That is a boom. And Um, I'm gonna Phil. This is this is a hard conversation for me to have because when this video goes out, we email it out, people watch it live. We have your podcast, and this is going to go out. I'm going to have real estate agents who are going to turn around and say to me, "Tommy, come on, mate. Don't speak like that." But Phil, I just think to myself, real estate agents, mortgage brokers, get sensitive. One of the biggest problems that you've got at the moment is getting your vendors to accept the reality of the market. You might as well tell people what the truth is out there, right? You don't want vendors to be looking at the headline act. And this happens to me all the time, Phil. I'll do an auction, we're $100,000 short, and a vendor will say, but I heard a property sold 300,000 over reserve last week, right? So I think the narrative has got to be the truth. The truth will always set you free. Transparency to the buyer, transparency to the seller. And quite frankly, to every real estate agent that's worried about media talking the market down, which I really think is just telling the truth, think about it. Nearly every person that buys or sells a house, not every, but nearly every person, only does it for a lifestyle reason. They're not buying a house like they're buying some shares or Bitcoin. They're buying real estate because they want to have a holiday weekender, or they want to get divorced, or they want to move into the school area, or they're relocating for work. So it makes no difference, real estate agents. You will still, if you're good, will be doing quite well because whether the market is hot or the market's not, people are transacting.
I agree, Tom, and it's a bit sort of Chicken Little, isn't it? Where people think because the boom is over, we're in dire circumstances and real estate is on its knees. That's not the case. It's just a very different market. It's okay if it's not boom conditions. It's probably needed for us not to be in boom conditions. So, going back to the media, Tom, and I'm conscious about this, and this is very much the media. We're in the business of information here. We're communicating. We're sharing opinions. You've probably got advice. I'm not in that business, but this is okay. But there is certain parts of the media, Tom, that will tell you otherwise. They will beat up these stories, positive or negative, $300, $400 million over reserve. And then on the other side of it, how there's huge amounts of price discounting happening. It's a sign that the boom is over. Real estate doesn't warrant itself to be a good asset or investment class in this market. You should put your money elsewhere. You've got to be careful of all these narratives, Tom. And I know you've got some stories coming out that you're being quoted in. I don't want to take the thunder out of the Daily Telegraph. Great paper, by the way. And I know you've got a good relationship with them. I think you're their top columnist. So if they're desperate for sales, mate, they'll probably give you a phone call. You've got some narrative coming out around this right now. Are you putting your reputation on the line saying this is the way it is?
So there's going to be stories across the weekend. And I don't want to, take away the thunder from News Corp, but I've had an interview with him yesterday with Tim McIntyre, and he asked me, can I ask you, what are the KPIs or the evidence you've got that you're actually saying this? And I'll share them with our listeners and viewers. Number one, Phil, it's Thursday. Thursdays are an interesting day in real estate because Thursday's the day I get real estate agents say to me, Tommy, auction on Saturday, got one buyer only, trying to wrap it up. Don't want to go to auction on Saturday and have everyone see that there's no one interested in it. I'm trying to put it together right now. Number one sign is trying to sell it 24 or 48 hours before the auction day with one buyer. Second sign, the amount of properties that I get told, Tom, we're cancelling it. We've got no one. That's the second sign. Third sign, a lot of the times on a Saturday, property doesn't sell at auction, but it sells by 5 o'clock because they negotiate with the highest bidder. I've normally driven off, but they ring me up and say, mate, got it together. Now, what they're saying to me, Tommy, I didn't get it together. The buyer said they've got other options. That wasn't happening last year. They no longer have fear of missing out. They actually have got fear of overpaying. And I think, Phil, the fear of overpaying is highly impacted by a few headwinds that are coming. Obviously, the war is not a positive thing, it's a more harmful thing generally. Number two, look, whether rates go up next month or in 3 months or in 6 months, I think the average person thinks they're going to go up before they go down, right? The third thing is we've got a federal election. Whether Labor or Liberal win, Phil, it still puts a pause on the real estate market because that's what it does. And when you think about that, and you think there's a decent possibility that Labor could win, the average pundit, whether it's true or not, the average pundit thinks a Labor-run country is probably not as good as a Labor-run country if you're in property. I'm not going to go off and say, oh, that's the case. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure. I've been working in real estate for 35 years with both governments, and I can tell you that there have been times where it's been more policies that a government puts in that actually impacts the market, like a vendor duty tax or what have you. So they're the indicators, Phil, of why I'm saying what I'm saying to you today.
Yeah, and I think the opposition is very conscious of that sentiment that a Liberal government is perceived to be better for people who are involved in or being supportive of positive property markets. I know the leader of the opposition, Anthony Albanese, come out just the other day, pretty much trying to dispel some of those myths. He's told us he's got 3 properties. So I imagine he's got his principal place of residence and a couple of investment properties. And he's been clear that he's not going to mess around with taxes or policies when it comes to property. He said they're going to leave negative gearing alone. He said that they're supportive of those discussions around alleviating stamp duty concerns to help transact with property. So I think he's trying to say, hey, we're not going to do anything in the property space. So if you think that's a reason why not to vote for us, don't, because it's all going to be cool for property investors and homeowners.
Phil, just for some useful information, I sold Albanese's property many years ago. Yes, he owned a property.
Get him a good price?
I can't remember exactly the figure, but it was 30 years ago, and maybe 25.
Yeah.
He was married to another politician who were the vendors. I think her name was Margaret Tabbitt or something like that. Dark hair. And we sold his property. It was on the border of Marrickville and Dulwich Hill. And nice guy. All I remember is at the time was wearing an earring.
Well, you know, the offer is there. If anyone is connected in with the leader of the opposition or the Labor Party, we offer the opportunity for Anthony Albanese to come and have a yarn to us and tell us all about property, what his views are for it. We're happy to have guests, aren't we, Tom?
Oh, Phil, and listen, you've got the clout to do it because, you know, whilst you're not Fairfax or News Corp, you're not too down the order of pecking in terms of influence in communities in the marketplaces and the real estate communities and the financial services, mortgage brokers, lawyers. These are all strong communities that can get influenced on who they're going to vote for. So I wouldn't discount the opportunity for many of these people to maybe add Sky News to Real Estate Exposed as a potential, because not everyone that's watching this would be watching Sky News or ABC for that matter.
Yeah, but probably got more people watching this, Tom, that watch Sky. But anyway, I had to put that dig in. So you got this piece coming out in the Telegraph over the weekend. I look forward to reading that, Tom. And I think you're working up something else there with the Telegraph. And this is a really interesting point. I want to have a quick discussion about it, because whether you're a mortgage broker or whether you're a real estate agent or some other sort of professional, I think we don't need to sell the benefits of being engaged and being connected with your community, whatever that is. It doesn't matter. Providing value and information to them, to have a relationship with them, which isn't just yourself on the phone, but other ways you can do that on scale. A lot of people do that through video, Tom. But this perception, particularly within real estate, probably less so in mortgages, that if you're going to appear on video and put it out into the the internet or the social media channels. It needs to be a highly polished, professionally produced package of information. But largely, the opposite of that gets the biggest impact. The raw, authentic footage of people doing what they do in the way in which they do it normally gets more cut through. What's going on with that, Tom? Why are people blowing all this dough on professional videography when they can just keep it real?
So this got inspired by this video here, which some people may or may not see. Obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't. The property was at 40 Sylvana Street in Greenacre a few days ago, and it's now got 1,000 likes, 358,000 views, and comments and comments and comments. And it was interesting because the process of this video was 1 minute before the auction, I just said to the agent, "You want me to stream it?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Here." I gave him the phone. He goes, "Oh, no, I've got to take down the bids." He just found this young PO. I said, "Oh, they can hold the phone." He goes, "Is there a mic?" No, there's no mic. Just there. Is there anything else? No, it's just a phone, just like you've got a camera. Anyway, the point is, I know from my own research, 358,000 live views. If I had this as a pre-recorded video, Phil, I reckon I'd be lucky to get 20,000 views. This is a big learning on social media. People want to see you fail and be vulnerable and see what happens unexpected. They know that anything that is pre-recorded has got the sales effect. It's been edited. They want to tell us what they want to tell us. Whereas live, man, they're putting their neck on the line, and we might actually see something bizarre, which they didn't. And this is why this video has gone viral, because it was. I was heckled for 45 minutes and intimidated, and it all ended up well. The guy said, "Thank you, sorry, I hope there's no hard feelings." But Phil, there's a very big learning for everyone in social media. I think that people will always pick raw and authentic than anything that is fabricated or touched up. In fact, anything that looks like an ad or enhancing someone is going to get less engagement than live. Like in media, when I worked at News Corp, I was always given access on a weekly basis to all the ratings of all the shows. Phil, what got the most ratings? Sport, live. News, live. People love live, right? They know that when it's live, it's authentic, it's in the moment. So you probably need the combination of in the moment, raw and authentic, but at the same time, you do want to show people I've got the ability, if I want to have a high quality video production company for certain things. That's how you separate yourself. You can do both. Gary Vaynerchuk does that reasonably well, Yeah, Phil. So that's gonna happen. I encourage every real estate agent and every mortgage broker and every person that's in any services industry to take advantage of the best camera that they have, and that's the one that they've got with them, which is generally a phone, and take advantage of in the moment content. You've got a vendor that turns around and says, "Phil, mate, thank you so much. I can't believe it." And they jump on you, man. That's got to be caught in the moment, right? You've come inside the house and you've just told the vendor, "I know you wanted 1.2, but guess what? We just got you 1.4. Really? That's the stuff you want to get that's in the moment, Phil.
Yeah, live is key. Hence the reason why we do this, Tom. We could do this in a studio somewhere and make us get rid of all our ums and ahs and little foibles of the way we talk, but it's not raw, it's not authentic. And authenticity, whether it's media authenticity in sales, authenticity in customer service or the client experience, is what counts. Absolutely what counts.
Now, Phil, can I ask you your view in the next, we've got a few things happening. We've got Easter. We've got Anzac Day. We've got school holidays. We come back from all of that, and then we're going to be seeing TV commercials every day telling us vote Labor, vote Liberal. We got an election, right? How do you see the next few months panning out in the world of business?
In the world of business, well, I think I'll start. I'll start with the world of real estate. I concur with your sentiments, Tom. I think And it always happens when it comes around election. We've got the federal budget on Tuesday of next week. Then we've got the response from the opposition a couple of days after. And that sort of parks that budget side of things. It's going to be a very safe budget, I think. You're not going to see too much there. You're going to get some ideas and intent around where the government is going to prioritise its spending moving forward. I think you're going to see quite a significant amount of dollars put towards the evolving sort of geopolitical aspects that's facing Australia right now. Defence spending has been announced to increase. We're increasing the ADF considerably over time. You're going to see money going into supporting Australian manufacturing, I believe, and how we can make sure this notion, Tom, and it's something that everyone should really at least have an appreciation of. It's this sovereign capability. This is the big thing right now, sovereign capability. Does Australia have what it needs and what it takes in order to look after itself, irrespective of the environment? The environment might be geopolitical or strategic. It might be the economic environment. It might be access to markets, access to supply chains. How do we make a bigger, stronger, safer Australia and look after our own backyard here first? So then it's going to be a big theme moving forward. And I think that's going to shape business sentiments over the course of the rest of the year. To your point, what's going to happen with business. But in many ways, up until that election takes place, Tom, it's going to be pretty steady as you go. No one's really going to put their head out doing too much. It's just going to see what's going to happen. So with real estate, people are going to be sitting back going, what's going to happen? When it comes to the wider business community, some big issues, Tom. Yes, it's a very much a positive environment for Australian business. You only need to look at the job adverts going up on Seek or being advertised right now. There's more jobs out there than what we have people to fill. We really need to get back into a more normalised environment where we have immigration firing, getting the right people into Australia to support that wider ongoing economic growth for Australia as a middle sort of power nation. That's going to shape how businesses and business environment reacts to it. It's a big issue trying to get the right people into different organisations to do the right jobs. Tom, I've heard anecdotally that just the property management sector, for example, is short of thousands and thousands of people. There is a huge gap there on what we need in order to fulfill what needs to get done now within PMs and what we have available to us. So I think for Australian businesses running up to the election and running after that, that's probably going to be a key point on the radar. I think also businesses are concerned about the potential uplift with rates, what's that's going to happen to any of their debt levels and the repayments around it. They're probably planning for that. And I know a lot of agents, they may use finance to fund different parts of their organisations on the radar as well. But Tom, I think it's going to be intriguing as we run into the election to start now seeing these policies coming down and this sort of positioning and jockeying about how we're going to go about moving forward once this election happens. I think some things, irrespective of what goes on with the election, will remain consistent. I think there's very much a collective approach to security. I think there's very much a collective approach now to not tinkering too much with where Australians keep their wealth. That is a property market and the consideration or the awareness that property is very much the heartbeat of this nation when it comes to employing 1 in 8 Australians are somehow connected in with property, and stabilisation and certainty and continuity of Australia's property market is definitely connected in with our ability to drive forward as a nation. So that's sort of a very collective, sort of broad stroke view around it all, Tom. Your views, and you reckon steady as you go for this next period of time?
Look, the first issues that you touched on, labour shortage. I mean, I was in Byron Bay last week. At 7:30, I went to Woolies at Byron Bay, which is not far from my home. And there was a sign on the door. I mean, this Woolies at Byron Bay is open till, I think, midnight. It's probably the busiest. And it said, on the sign on the door said, we don't have enough staff at the moment. We'll be closing Woolies at 7 o'clock till further notice, right? This is Woolies, right? Then I spoke to a builder the following weekend, or the following day, and he said, he quoted a number on a property. And I said to him, 1.5. I said, that was $1 million 1.5 years ago. He goes, if we were quoting $1 million 18 months ago, we're quoting 1.5. The combination of materials going up and staff shortages, that's stock on. So there are issues, Phil, out there that need to get tackled by the government, by this government or by the next government. There are issues, Phil. I don't know, how are you finding it with labour, with staff recruitment in your business?
I think everyone's got the same challenges. I don't know exactly how many active job roles we have in our organisation, but I would probably need your hands and my hands to be able to count them all, right? Like, you know, we're hiring and we're hiring rapidly, and it is a challenge. It is a challenge to find the right people. And, you know, where we are in Australia, it's a good thing and a bad thing is that most Australians that want a job at the moment have a job. Everyone's talking about this sort of great resignation. I don't subscribe to that here in Australia, at least for businesses who have a positive sentiment. I think you're seeing a shuffle. People's expectations about how and where they want to work, I think, will drive the narrative moving forward. But everyone's faced with this, Tom. You know, it's very difficult in some areas of the economy where, you know, normally the jobs are filled by more transient workers. And by that, I mean sort of, you know, travelers and students and this sort of stuff that you just can't. You can't find the people. So what does it mean? Well, it stunts economic growth because you can't have people, you can't get people to actually do the work that needs doing. Now, one of the key things, I think the current government's trying to address this, is this notion around changing COVID isolation laws, whereby at the moment, if one person in your household has COVID, well, everyone's deemed to be a close contact, a household contact, and therefore the whole household needs to isolate. So basically, if you've got two people in a household who are workers and income generating, you're not taking one of them out, you're taking two of them out of the equation. And that sort of stunts a whole bunch of different issues. You spoke about supply chain issues, Tom. Building materials 30-40% more expensive. Number one, we can't get it into Australia, and then number two, we're having troubles distributing around the nation because of these labor shortages. So this is a key area that needs to be fixed. It will fix over time, like naturally it will fix over time. And I think both the government and the opposition, this will be a key thing to how they approach running up to the election, but subsequent to that, how the election will move forward, or how they'll move forward once in government. So big issues, Tom. They're macro and micro. They impact both the federal level, the state level, and at the local market level. Some areas are impacted more than others. But again, this all comes back to real estate. The way in which Australians are choosing to live, and we've seen it as we sort of entered COVID and managed through COVID, this sort of migration to the regional areas, the migration, interstate migration is taking place. And we're spoken about property markets now. The boom is over. You spoke about Sydney and Melbourne. Things are really starting to shift then back into a normalised market. You know, there is some discounting taking place. That'll just take it to an equilibrium, Tom. But I think there are areas which are still firing in terms of real estate. There are areas which represent good value and good buying for investors. And I'll put this out there, Tom. These areas that we've spoken about beforehand, within striking distance of the CBD that offer lifestyle benefits, I think they're the markets that will buck this trend around the boom being over. And I'll say, you know, it's a lot of people think this wouldn't matter, but I was only thinking about the other day. People like Elon Musk, I believe, are going to have a fundamental impact on Australian property moving forward. And why, you ask? Well, he's got this thing called Starlink, which is satellite internet. He's got thousands of satellites whirring around the world now. He's launching out of his SpaceX facility. You've got this thing now called Starlink, which regional Australia all over the place are embracing. Once upon a time, up until now, at best, you had a shoddy satellite connection or some sort of NBN service. At worst, you were operating on ADSL, Tom. So this was stifling people's ability to work in these regional areas. The introduction of this thing called SpaceX and Starlink, mate, you're getting download speeds from this thing up over 300 megabytes per second. I challenge most people in the capital cities here to be getting 50 or 60. It is an absolute game changer, Tom. And this alone is going to change the ability for people to work in a more flexible basis. I think Elon Musk.
Phil, I've been hearing about this, and I can't remember the conversation I had, but it is out there now in Australia.
Yep. It's out there,
right?
And it works.
Someone told me in Byron Bay that's right, because because of the floods and that Northern Rivers areas had been impacted. And then he said to me, "Oh no, we've been using the Elon Musk one." And I actually asked him, I go, "Is it expensive?" He goes, "No, about the same." That's what he said to me.
It costs you about $800 to get set up, and about $120. I don't want this to be an ad for Starlink, by the way, or Elon. If you listen to this, mate, you can give us some sponsorship dollars. 120 odd bucks a month for unlimited internet. It's still in beta phase, but people are using it, and it largely works, mate. It is a game changer for regional areas in Australia. And by regional areas, to this thesis I have, which is striking distance of the CBD, offer lifestyle benefits. So for Sydney, that would be areas like the Blue Mountains, Wollongong, and the Central Coast. The same thing applies in other areas around Australia. It's a game changer, mate. It will change real estate because the utility of it all, internet now is as important as power for the modern knowledge worker largely, or all workers. So if you've got that and you've got control over it and you have stability over it, a lot more people are going to be looking at these lifestyle locations. Just putting it out there.
All right, you heard it here before, Starlink. I'm going to go Google it now. I'm going to go Google it. And if you are listening, Elon, we're waiting for a bonnet to come from America. My car's been out of action for 6 weeks. They told me they're waiting for the parts to come from America.
Mate, supply chain issues. Supply chain issues.
Yeah.
Supply chain issues.
Phil,
Tom,
pleasure.
have you chat to your people over at Telegraph. Feed them that story around Starlink and how that will be one of the top 5 things that will shape real estate in Australia over the coming sort of 3 years, is that access to internet.
Oh, well, I can tell you that's music to my ear, because my business model now, apart from face-to-face auctions on a Saturday, if I've got just incredible Wi-Fi that allows video to be consumed at super fast speeds, and that it's robust internet, that I don't need to keep switching off and tethering between a mobile phone. If I've got something that's robust, I've got to tell you, I have every reason in the world not to be working out of Sydney, right? Yeah, I'm going to Google it as we finish off. Big shout out to everyone. Thank you again. We are going to try and get Albanese on. We'll see. We'll see if we get Albo on, right?
Who's your contact, Tom? What's the email address, Tom, for anyone that wants to reach out to us?
info@tompanos.com.au, and I'll call you up personally myself, Albo, if you send us an email. But I actually think, as we're moving into the election, maybe we need to bring in a couple of guests to help our community understand policies that impact their lives. It'd be really good. And I'm very certain, if it's not Albo, there are people that are out there at a grassroots level that are trying to actually get the word out there. And man, lawyers, real estate agents, investors, property buyers, mortgage brokers, they're a big community that have a big say on election day.
They are. It's good to see you, Tom.
All righty, Phil. Signing off, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you next Thursday.